She stood in the hallway and stared silently at the suitcases, the laptop, his briefcase. They lay where she hadn't noticed them when she'd walked in. She walked back into the room and looked at the man sitting in the shadows. "You're crazy, Lyle. You're abandoning me and our two sons because of one fight. Because of one stupid mistake I made while drunk a few hours ago. I didn't have sex with anyone. I didn't betray you. You're just obsessed." When he didn't answer anything, she headed toward him, and he raised his hand again as if signaling her to stop. She stopped. She wondered if he had had an accident. This man was not her husband, was not someone she had lived with for 8 years. No one could change so drastically in a few hours. He'd never been like this before, never. And the worst part was, there was nothing to explain it. Nothing much had happened at the party. She stepped back but didn't sit down. "Can you tell me why? Can't you at least do that?" I had a moment of clarity. She heard the words, but couldn't put them into any kind of logic. A moment of clarity? Why are you doing this, Lyle? I know you think you're smarter than me, everyone in my family, everyone around you. But why can't you not rub our noses in the fact that we're idiots compared to you? Say it in words I can understand. The figure shrouded in shadow shifted her posture, tilted her head forward slightly, and seemed to rest it on her clenched fists. "I'm sorry, Diana. I really am. I didn't mean to do it that way. It's just what English literature professors think and say. It's really not that hard to explain. We, all of us, go around and around, never really understanding what the point of all our lives is. We are blinded by all the minutiae of our existence, waking up, brushing our teeth, going to work, paying bills, and what's on TV today. And the kids have colds, and we wonder if we're getting fat, and if our husbands or wives are looking at other people. We never step back and look at our lives. Except once in a while." He paused and she fell silent, hoping he would continue. "I had a moment of clarity tonight." "You keep saying that, but what does it mean? What did you see?" Even though she couldn't see his face clearly, she knew he had focused his gaze on her face. She could feel the power of his gaze on her skin. "I saw our lives, Diana. I've seen who we are, who we were, and who we've become. It has nothing to do, or very little to do, with what happened at the party. You're right. Leaving because of one fight, one mistake, one incident would be crazy. But that's not why I'm leaving. I'm leaving because I've realized that our marriage was a mistake, that I love you, but you don't love me, that I've never satisfied and probably never will satisfy you sexually the way you need me to, that deep down you're a good woman and will never leave me because you keep your promises, and that we're too young to ruin each other's lives for the next 40 or 50 years. That's why I'm leaving when we're done talking." Next chapter. About 3 hours earlier. I pulled into my driveway at 9:30 p.m. My cell phone was silent. It had been silent since I left the Rivers Trailer Park south of Palatka at 8 p.m., leaving my wife and about 75 of her close and distant family and friends to drink and dance at the monthly party that had been a tradition for most of our 8 years of marriage. We lived in Jacksonville, the urban center of Northeast Florida, with a population of 1 million, an hour and a half north of Palatka. The house was dark except for an automatic yard light with an electric sensor that illuminated the driveway as I walked, or rather limped, down it. It had been a stormy evening, and I felt much older than my chronological age of 34, more like 74. But I only had to lug a 6-pack of Michelob Lights into the house, so I managed. I turned on the kitchen light and sat down at the table where we actually ate, not in the little dining nook where we were supposed to eat. I unscrewed the lid of one Michelob and took a long sip of the delightfully cold drink, letting it slide down my throat. Then another. All the while, I waited for the first ringing tone from my cell phone. Nothing. I looked at the pictures 5-year-old Billy had drawn at school with a crayon magnetized to the refrigerator door and the picture of 7-year-old David catching his first pass in a Pop Warner Pee Wee football game. My throat caught, and I consciously fought to keep from bursting into tears as I looked at David's dark-haired young body, captured in the moment of his first athletic triumph. He looked like his mother, with her dark hair and slender figure. Both boys had their mother's dark hair, not sandy blonde, and both boys had their mother's light brown eyes, not ice blue. I fought the lump in my throat. They and their mother were my world. Until a few hours ago, I was going to lose them all, and it was like standing on the railroad tracks in the dark of night, watching for an oncoming train and being frozen to the tracks. I took another sip and leaned my head against the dark-grained wood of the table for a moment. I finished the bottle and forced myself to get up from the table. Sooner or later the phone would ring, and then the front door would open. But until that happened, I had things to do. I went up to the second floor, to the bedroom that Diane and I had shared for 5 years, ever since we'd moved to this rather expensive neighborhood in Mandarin. We moved there because the schools there weren't bad. I taught an introductory English literature course at Jacksonville University, a small private liberal arts college across town. But I liked the Mandarin neighborhood better than the area around the university, so I resigned myself to the hour-long daily commute. I opened the closet door and discovered in the depths 2 suitcases that Diane and I had used for our last cruise 2 years ago to the Bahamas. I then began opening the drawers and pulling out as much underwear as I could find. I pulled out a week's worth of pants, shirts, and jackets. I didn't forget to put in a razor, toothbrush, toothpaste, a few medications, everything I needed for a trip away from home. I leaned over the dresser and felt the urge to vomit. I fought it down. Only there was no way this trip was going to end. It was an exile from everything I loved or had loved, and I was never going back. If I let myself think about it too much, I knew I would freeze. So I very methodically started packing the things I needed to start my life over as a single man after 8 years of marriage. I found my laptop and my briefcase with the papers I needed for college. I moved everything into the hallway that led to the dining room to the left of the front door. They wouldn't be seen by anyone entering the house unless they went into the dining room. When I'd gathered what I could, I grabbed a carton of Michelob with 5 bottles of beer left in it and went into the dining room. The front door opened into a hallway that led to the right, and then into the den room. I sat down in an upholstered chair at the far end of the room and set the Michelob on the glass coffee table in front of me. There was a floor lamp behind the upholstered chair, and I turned it off. There was a light on in the hallway that could have been turned on by anyone entering. I stood on the chair and loosened the light bulb in the center of the den so it wouldn't come on when you hit the switch at the entrance to the den. With everything I needed ready, I reclined in the padded chair in the darkness of what was my home, opened a second Michelob, and began to sip cautiously. Around 11 p.m., the cell phone rang for the first time. The Nokia screen lit up in the darkness, and I recognized Diane's phone number. I didn't bother to answer it. About 3 minutes later, it beeped that there was a message waiting for me. I didn't answer it. 5 minutes after that, it rang again, and then another 3 minutes later, and another 5 minutes later, and another 10 minutes later, and another 5 minutes later. Diane rang, and her father Richard, and older brother Dave, and younger sister Kelly, and then Diane again. If there were any humor left in the world, I would find the parade of phone numbers funny. But the funny had died hours ago, and I didn't think I'd find anything funny for a long time, if ever. The house phone rang, then the cell phone, then the house phone. I had just finished my second Michelob and was starting on my third. Time crawled by and, like a traitor, refused to run backwards, to let the day that had ruined my life unwind and give me a second chance. But even as I expressed this common human desire, I realized that what had happened had been brewing for more than one day, and I would have to rewind time back at least 8 years to undo the consequences, and that wasn't going to happen. Next chapter. November turned out to be chilly, but not bad. Usually this time of year, the RV parking lot and cabins at Lake Como south of Palatka were nearly deserted. So for Richard Carter, his family and friends, it was a great place to hold their monthly dance party in a quiet place where no one would complain about noise or call the police and people could relax. Carter and his wife Ricky raised 9 boys and girls, 8 of whom are still alive, and when all the kids got together with other family members, uncles, aunts, and friends, there was usually a crowd of 100 or more adults. Richard and Ricky built a pavement and asphalt company that made them millionaires by the time they were 60, and they enjoyed hosting Saturday monthly parties. There was always Southern rock, fried chicken, ribs and oysters in season, and plenty of beer and spirits for every taste. Diane and I didn't get to come every month, but we tried to be there as often as possible. Richard and Ricky did their best to welcome a Yankee stranger from the foreign state of Massachusetts into their family, even though I knew it was sometimes difficult for them to understand me and how I made a living. I didn't sell cars, fix cars, build houses, develop parking lots, or make money in the ways that everyone else in their group did. I stood in front of bored young men and women and talked about poetry, novels, essays, and other things that most members of the Carter clan understood little and cared even less about. The drinking usually began around noon. There were cabins available for those who needed cabins to sleep off the excess booze, as well as several RVs. Diane and I sent the boys to friends whose parents we trusted. They knew we could return tonight or Sunday morning. We watched their kids when they needed us. There was an old concrete dance pavilion that was used mostly only during Carter parties, and it had a loudspeaker. We ate and drank a little while people came in and started drinking. By 5 p.m., dusk had fallen. The music got louder and the drinking got more intense. Diane would walk around and talk to people, and I would stand at one of the tables, still piled high with food, and eat grapes. Sometimes I would just watch her for hours at these parties, because dancing and drinking were not my thing. Just looking at her and marveling that a stranger could come along and steal her away from the hordes of Southern suitors who wanted that body and face in their dreams. As usual, drinking, dancing, seductive women and men were not the most peaceful combination. One of Kelly's sister's old man dragged her to dance to a particularly winding tune and began entertaining her in front of everyone until her husband Billy jumped out and brought him down with a thunderous right-hand punch. Eventually, everyone calmed down, the beer flowed, and not a few minutes later the two men shook hands. The old beau got a kiss from his former lover, and Billy and Kelly went off to find a dark place to do the dirty deed they usually did at every party. The pavilion was getting crowded. Even Richard and Ricky were moving to the beat of Southern rock when I noticed that I had lost sight of Diana. When I spotted her, my stomach clenched. She was slow dancing with a tall, dark-haired man in a calico shirt and jeans. She was sprawled in his arms. Bobby Trescott was one of the men who had pursued her before I showed up at the insurance company where she was working on transferring my auto insurance to her company. For some reason, she took a fancy to a stranger with an even weirder accent, and 6 months later we were married. Bobby was never able to accept her decision. He still called and visited occasionally, and Diane insisted on seeing him as a friend, not an ex-boyfriend. At these parties, he always danced inappropriately close, touched things he shouldn't have touched, and usually made some clever remark to and about me, much to the amusement of many. I made my way through the twilight toward the two of them, watching them move together. I couldn't help but feel jealous. Diana had been drinking. Not enough to be drunk, but enough to relax and kind of snuggle up to him. I got close enough and said loud enough for them to hear, "Hey, Bobby, mind if I cut in?" Diana looked at me guilt-free and smiled lazily. "Hey, babe, I was just having a little dance with old Bobby. I promised him this dance. It's the dance from our prom. You don't mind if I finish it with him, do you?" Bobby smirked, and so I could see it as he touched her. Because of the semi-darkness, only the three of us could see what he was doing. Diane threw him a funny look and then looked at me. I tried to read her facial expression. Was she angry at him for what he was doing, or at me for letting him do it? I tried to remain calm, but it was slipping away from me. "Bobby, get your goddamn hand off my wife." His smile grew even wider. "Or what, Lyle?" Jesus Christ, what kind of a man's name is Lyle? Does that sound like a little girl's name? "Hey, Lyle, that's gay," I stammered. I hadn't been in a scuffle in 20 years. "I don't care what you think of my name. Get your hands off my wife." Diane took her hand and pushed his arm so that he let go of it. "Okay, Bobby, chill out." Why are you always acting like a jerk around Lyle? He's my husband. He's not a jerk like you. You're always trying to get him into fights because you know you're going to kick his ass. That's not fair. And Lyle, I'm not a little girl. Bobby's a little drunk, but I can handle him. I've known him most of my life. You don't have to make a scene trying to save me. Hell, I might have to save you. I couldn't believe my ears. I now knew that several couples around us had heard this conversation, and I heard giggling. What the hell did you just say? Her eyes widened, and I wondered if she'd even thought about what she'd said. Oh, Lyle, I'm sorry, baby. I didn't mean it. How the hell could you mean it? Bobby nudged her in the side. She meant that if you stick your nose in my face, I'll kick your ass and smash your face in, you damned pencil-necked weirdo. The only reason I didn't do it sooner is because she keeps begging me not to hurt you. What kind of goddamn man hides behind his wife's skirts? I couldn't help myself. The one who can count to 10 without using his fingers, you redneck asshole. The one who came and took your girl away from you without bothering. The one who made 2 kids with her. I'm not even sure you can do that. I saw the swing coming even as I felt people coming up behind us. I moved to get out of the way when my foot slipped on what was probably someone's spilled drink. I fell on my ass and hit my head on the concrete pad. Diane's brother Dave and his friend walked over to Bobby and grabbed him by both arms. I hit hard, and it knocked the spirit out of me. For a moment, I was stunned. Bobby didn't try to shake off the guys holding his arms, probably feeling that he had gotten the better of them. Richard Carter came up behind us and said in a hard voice, "Okay, Bobby, that's enough. We let you come to these parties because you're an old friend of ours, but you've crossed the line. Get out of here." I looked up at Bobby's smirking face and looked around at the faces around me. I saw smiles or desperate attempts not to smile. And then I looked at my beloved wife's serious face and realized she was another one struggling with this. She thought it was funny, and when I looked at her, she deliberately turned her face away, toward her father. "Daddy, no. Bobby just had a drink. He didn't mean anything by it. You know he and Lyle are fighting, but that doesn't mean anything. And anyway, I promised him this dance." Even Richard Carter looked at his daughter with disbelief. "Are you sure this is what you want, Diana? After what Bobby said about your husband?" She looked back at me, not smiling. "Lyle's a grown man, Dad. If he gets upset about something Bobby does, he knows what he can do about it. Right, kiddo?" I tucked my arms under me and rose to my feet. I just turned and walked away from my wife. Bobby started laughing. I heard giggles, and I desperately wanted to believe that Diana wasn't among them, but I wasn't going to turn around to make sure. As I was leaving the dance floor, Richard caught up with me and spoke as I walked away. "Son, I know you're pissed off right now, but listen to me. I know Diana loves you, whether you believe it now or not. But women. Look, sometimes a woman, even the best woman, wants to know that her man will fight for her. Maybe they don't do that where you come from, but here, a woman will not respect a man who will back down from another man's attempt to move in on her. Do what you think is right, but even if Bobby beats the shit out of you, at least fighting him will show her that you care enough about her to fight for her." I kept walking. "You're right, Richard. Where I come from, women don't do that. A good woman wouldn't encourage some cunt hound to get into a situation where her husband has to fight for her. Only if they love their husband, only if they have a real marriage. Now I'm not sure of either of those things." He grabbed my hand, and I had enough respect for him not to lash out. Maybe you're right about her lack of respect for you. I'm only her father. I can't interfere with that, but I can tell you that she loves you. Don't do anything stupid right now. Just go somewhere, have a drink, and chill out. Things will sort themselves out. Maybe. And then I left him after all. Next chapter. The driveway alley was illuminated by the headlights of a car pulling into our driveway at 12:45 a.m. I drank 1.5 Michelob and felt pretty calm. I heard car doors opening and voices. I opened the window next to the chair, even though it made the house feel chilly. But when people parked because of the slope of the driveway, unless they were talking in a whisper, they seemed to be standing next to the window, and I could usually hear every word. He's here! It was big, Brother Dave. Thank God. Son of a bitch. He's just a miserable bastard. Chill out. I know you're sober now. After showing your ass like that, just be glad he's here and not having fun with some random ponytail like most guys. Shut up. He's my goddamn husband who goes off to suck his thumb when his feelings are hurt and leaves his wife. What kind of husband is that? The kind whose wife has fun with her ex-boyfriend right in front of him, you stupid bitch. If you weren't my sister and you didn't have those boys, I'd tell him to just dump your ass and go find someone who won't humiliate him in public. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The front door opened and they walked in. A moment later, a light bulb went on in the hallway and light burst into the den. But it only penetrated the center of the room. I sat in the dark. Dave entered the den first, Diana following on his heels. He looked around and saw my figure sitting in the shadows in a padded chair. He stared at me for a moment, then said, "Hi, Lyle." "Hi, Dave." There was a seemingly endless silence. I wasn't going to be the first to speak to her. Finally, she said, "Lyle." "Diane," I said, in the same even, emotionless tone. "Are you okay?" asked Dave. "Fine, thanks for asking." "You bastard!" She shouted it like a cork popped, and she couldn't hold back any longer. "I love you too, bitch." She tensed up, and if Dave hadn't held out his hand, I think she might have lunged at me. Her hair was disheveled, her face flushed, her lipstick long since wiped off, and her white dress was wrinkled and stained with dirt. The party must have been hellish after I left. Smartass, always some smartass. You think it's funny to leave me alone, not tell anyone where you're going, just disappear. What kind of man does that? I don't know. Probably some coward too scared to fight a man who entertains his wife with her permission in front of all their friends and relatives. She had the decency to blush, and Dave threw her a dirty look. "You had us worried, kid," Dave said. "Why didn't you answer your cell phone, any of your phones?" "I didn't feel like talking to anyone." And he rubbed his chin and shifted his gaze from Diana to me. I guess I'll leave you guys to talk. It's been a long night. A hell of a long night. I'm getting too old for this shit. Are you sure you're okay, Lyle?" "I was just being polite, Dave. I'm not okay. And I don't know if I ever will be again. But that's not your problem. Thanks for getting Diane home. If it had been up to me, she could have gone home with Bobby or gone camping in the RV parking lot." He gave us both another look and then just shook his head. Then he looked at Diane. "I'll leave then, Lyle. Let you guys work it out yourselves. Diana, walk me out, okay?" "Sad." I realized from their voices that they were standing outside his Chevy Tahoe. Damn him, Dave. What an asshole he is. Any other guy would have thrown himself at Bobby or gotten drunk or done something human. And he goes off and sulks at home. He doesn't... I'd kick Bobby's ass, just like Tommy and most of the guys we know. Lyle's not like that. He's not a fighter. You knew that when you decided to go after him. You remember. I remember very well. You said he's not the kind of guy who comes home with fat under his fingers, gives you 6 or 7 kids, gets drunk every weekend, and screws you over when you put on a couple pounds. You said, and I quote, "He's a man who will get his way. He will provide for me and our children, be faithful to me, and provide a good life for us. He's a good man." You wanted something better and you got it, and now you're nervous and dancing. I used to be proud of you, Diane, but now I wonder if you're just another slut who's going to get divorced 4 or 5 times, drag home new boyfriends every few weeks, and make mom and dad cry when they think about the mess you've made of your life. Oh, Dave, grow up. I'm not stupid. I've been a mess. I played with Bobby because it felt good to feel young again for one night. My husband should have grabbed me and made me behave, but I forgot who I was married to. He's angry now, but it will pass. It was one night and one fight. I'll come to him, give him some love, and it will pass. People don't break up over one quarrel. You bet they do, sister. You think because I build houses, I don't know anything about your dear husband. I have clients and partners whose children attend JU. They talk about Lyle. He's young, he has hair, he's smart, and many female students think he's cute. There were times when an A or even a C would get him blown off. And then there were the female professors. One, let's just say she pursued him so openly that the dean had to tell her to chill out or they'd take action. So go in there and do whatever you need to do. You lose him, and he won't sit around crying into his beer for long. She came back and stood at the entrance to the den for another long time. None of us said anything. Then she started to cross the den, heading toward me. I raised my hand. Wait, get a chair and sit over there by the TV. That surprised her. I could read it on her face. She was expecting me to come over now, to lead her to the bedroom. But it didn't happen. She took a deep breath. I know. Lyle, I know I acted like complete shit in there today. You don't need to read me the riot act. Everyone else has already done it. Jesus Christ, everybody acts like you're blood and I'm a stranger. But I've been drinking, you know that. And Bobby, Bobby and I have a history. We go way back. We met in elementary school, you know? And you should know this. He still loves me. He still hasn't gotten over the fact that I chose you to be my husband. I know it's wrong, but I feel sorry for him. So sorry sometimes. And you're going to ease his pain by entertaining him? Anger flashed in her eyes. He's in pain. A little flirting makes him feel better. Nothing else was supposed to happen until you came in like a big man and started acting out. You didn't have to do that. He's a friend. And you're my husband, the man I love. After another moment, she sat down in the straight-backed chair. It wasn't the most comfortable in the world, which was what I was after. I don't want to change the subject, Diane, but I'm curious about something. I left the campground around 8, and the phone didn't start ringing until 11. I know the campground is a big place and there was a lot going on, but after that little incident, it took you 3 hours to realize I was nowhere to be found? You must have really felt guilty about what happened, since you realized that it only took 3 hours for me to disappear. I think if we hadn't had that little party, you wouldn't have realized I was missing until the next morning. That speaks volumes about how important I am in your life. Anger flashed in her eyes, and she was about to say something when she suddenly came to her senses and stopped. My God, Lyle, you don't know, do you? Know what? All hell broke loose after you left. I forgot about you. Everyone forgot for a while. But that doesn't mean I don't care about you. It's just... Enough. What happened? After, Bobby and I did a little dance. I know I shouldn't have done it, but I was so damn mad at you. I know you don't fight. But, God, it sounds like I'm 13 years old. But I was hurt that at least you didn't take a swing at Bobby. If he had taken a swing at you, I would have been there for you, loving and comforting you. I wanted that. You're my husband, but you left. So yes, I was furious. I danced with him. And you know, Bobby, he was drunk. So after a few minutes, he went to pee. Knowing Bobby, I figured he would either go to the lake or behind one of the cabins. I talked to a few people and thought nothing more of Bobby for a while. After about half an hour, I started wondering where he had gone. I wasn't worried about you because you're usually gone, and we don't meet until closer to evening. Then I heard a scream and everyone started running towards the lake. People crowded around a man lying on the ground. I tried to get closer, and then I realized it was Bobby. It was horrible. His face was covered in blood. One eye was swollen shut. I was told his arm and several fingers were broken. Dave and the others were talking to him, and I heard them say someone should call the sheriff. The 3 bikers got in Bobby's face, talking about how that old fart had ruined their party. When they started to argue, all 3 jumped on Bobby. He said some of them would be limping and sore for a while, but there were too many of them. That's when things went downhill. We called a rescue for Bobby, and the sheriff's office sent 3 cars, and they were checking the park to see if any bikers or anyone else was still there. And then after a while, they started checking to make sure everyone was in place. I took in what she was telling me, and the obvious question came to mind. And yet it took you 3 hours in total, and sometime after you knew there were some naughty bikers roaming the park to wonder where your beloved husband had gone. I repeat. I must really rank high on your list of important people. She bit her lip and didn't look at me. It hit me. You weren't at the park, were you? You wanted to go with Bobby to the hospital. You had to hold his hand, didn't you? She finally looked at me. He was pretty beat up, Lyle. He was in pain, and he asked me if I would go with him. I couldn't say, no, you couldn't. There seems to be a pattern of behavior developing. You just can't say no to Bobby. Don't do that, Lyle. It was a decent human thing to do. If you weren't so angry with me, you'd know that. Of course he was an old friend. An old friend you were having fun with before I came along. You must have been there for him in his time of need. You entertained him back then, didn't you? She looked at the floor, shook her head, and then met my eyes again. Yes, Lyle, you knew about it. We were serious back then, and I wasn't a little girl. We were having fun. Does that make you feel better? And before you ask, he was good. Very good. Does that make me a slut? What about you? Should I be jealous of every woman you've been with before me? No. That was then. This is now. Yes. He asked me to go with him, and I did. I held his hand, the one that didn't have broken fingers on it. We had an ER technician with us, and there were people around us every second while we were in the ER in Palatka getting him patched up. Nothing happened, Lyle, and even if we had been alone, mocking me would have been the last thing on his mind. You have nothing to be jealous of. Did I say I was jealous? You don't need to be. I can see it in your face every time he's around me. I guess I can't blame you. If you were always with another woman that I knew you were with, it would eat me up. Do you ever think about me? She lowered her eyes again and didn't look me in the eye. Lyle, you know that's not a fair question. So much has been going on. Bobby was hurt. Everyone was calling everyone else. So the answer is no. When and who finally started taking an interest in me? She continued to stare at the floor. Bobby was treated, and his brother came to take him home. I went back to the campground with Kelly and Billy. When I got there, Dad came up to me and asked if I'd seen you since. That's wonderful, Diane. Your father thinks enough of me to remember I'm missing before my wife does. She looked up at me, and I could see tears glistening in her eyes. Keep it up, Lyle. I screwed up, and you're going to hurt me as much as you can for what I did. Okay. Now I feel even shittier. I'm sorry. I guess your conscience is tormenting, isn't it? It's hard for me to tell because I didn't touch you. She just looked at me and lowered her gaze to the floor again. For a moment, we were both silent. Well, at least we've cleared that up, dear. She looked at me with a puzzled expression on her face. What? I stayed here because I wanted to be able to talk to you before I left. Leave. Where were you going? You're not still mad at me, are you? I looked at her, dirty, disheveled, with blood on her white dress, and thought that I had never seen anything so beautiful before. And I never would again. I have an errand to run that I've been putting off until I had a chance to talk to you. Then I'm going to find a place to stay for the night, some cheap motel, and on Monday I'll be arranging for a permanent residence and meeting with a lawyer. A place? For an overnight stay? With a lawyer? Lyle, are you out of your mind? What are you talking about? Did we just have a fight? Badly, but I love you. People don't break up over one fight. What happened to you, Lyle? We were happy this morning. What could have happened in less than 24 hours to make you want to leave me? I didn't answer her, just pointed down the hallway leading to the kids' bedrooms. Go, I said. She slowly got up and walked to the other room. I knew she would see the suitcases, the laptop, my briefcase. She came back into the room even more slowly, shaking her head like she couldn't believe what she saw. You're out of your mind, Lyle. You're abandoning me and our 2 sons. Because of one fight. Because of one stupid mistake I made when I got drunk a few hours ago. I didn't have sex with anyone. I didn't betray you. You're just obsessed. When I didn't respond, She started to move closer to me, and I raised my hand again to stop her. She backed away, but didn't sit down. Can you tell me why? Can't you at least do that? I had a moment of clarity. I could see she had no idea what I was talking about. A moment of clarity? Why are you doing this, Kyle? I know you think you're smarter than me, everyone in my family, everyone around you. But why can't you not rub our noses in the fact that we're idiots compared to you? Say it in words I can understand. She was right. I had taken my intellectual superiority over Diana and her family for granted too much. I didn't realize what an asshole I was just because I worked with my head instead of my hands and surpassed everyone in Diana's family in my education. I'm sorry, Diana. I really am. I didn't mean to do it that way. It's just what English literature professors think and say. It's really not that hard to explain. We, all of us, go around and around, never really understanding what the point of all our lives is. We are blinded by all the minutiae of our existence. Waking up, brushing our teeth, going to work, paying bills, and what's on TV today. And the kids have colds, and we wonder if we're getting fat, and if our husbands or wives are looking at other people. We never step back and look at our lives. Except once in a while. I paused for a moment, then added, I had a moment of clarity tonight. You keep saying that, but what does it mean? What did you see? I had to squeeze the words out of myself. It was the hardest speech I have ever given and ever will give because I knew I was killing our life together. Killing my life with the two boys I loved more than life. But she deserved to know why I was leaving. I've seen our life, Diana. I've seen who we are, who we were, and who we've become. It has nothing to do, or very little to do, with what happened at the party. You're right. Leaving because of one fight, one mistake, one incident would be crazy. But that's not why I'm leaving. I'm leaving because I've realized that our marriage was a mistake, that I love you, but you don't love me, that I've never satisfied and probably never will satisfy you sexually the way you need me to, that deep down you're a good woman and will never leave me because you keep your promises, and that we're too young to ruin each other's lives for the next 40 or 50 years. That's why I'll leave when we finish our conversation. She shook her head again, and this time the tears did flow. I knew she was crying for a life that was ending, just like me. Just because she didn't love me the way I loved her didn't mean there was no love. There just wasn't enough of it. How can you say things like that, Lyle? How can you be so cruel? Look at me, Diana. Answer me 2 questions, and if I'm wrong, I'll rethink what I said. A look of fear appeared on her face, and I realized that she somehow knew what I was about to ask her. Have you ever cheated on me, baby? Have you been with another man since we got married? She fell silent. The look on her face answered the question. Thank you. That's one of the reasons I love you. You could lie or try to tell half-truths, but you're too good a woman. You can't lie and you don't want to tell me the truth, which you know would break my heart. But we both know the answer to that question. You just answered it. The silence is eloquent. And the second question. Do you love me, Diana? I love you, Lyle. How the hell can you ask me that? It doesn't matter. What? You need to know that I love you. That's not what I asked, Diana. Do you love me? I don't understand. You love your father and your mother, our boys, our brothers and sisters. I know you would give your life for them. But being loved is different. It's when you catch your breath, when you look at a man who makes your heart beat faster when he kisses you, who you dream of and want when he's not around. That's what I feel for you. I don't know if you had those feelings for me when we were married, but I know you don't feel that way now. You'd be a good sister to me, but you're not a wife. Is that all? She stood up and headed toward me. Is it really all about sex, Lyle? Is that really what it's all about? You're sorry because I'm not some slut in bed with you. I got up and went into the light to meet her. When I walked into the light, she caught her breath and backed up. Oh my God! She gasped. She stopped backing away, reached out a trembling hand, and gently touched one side of my face, her fingers gently brushing over the swollen flesh surrounding my nearly closed left eye. I knew the rest of my face was made up of various shades of yellow, red, and brown. My lips were swollen except for a piece missing from the left side. Oh my God, they found you and beat you up too. Why didn't you go to the hospital for medical attention? I tried to smile, and that in itself had to be scary as hell, judging by the look on Diana's face. You should look at the other guy. I realized from the expression that slowly made its way across her face that she understood what my expression meant. Next chapter. I stood in the dark by the lake, listening to the music and imagining I could still hear the laughter of the people around Diane and Bobby. I didn't need to go back to realize she was dancing with him. I could have gone back and confronted Bobby face to face. I'd been beaten before, back in the days when I'd been running around the streets of South Boston as a wild child without a father. I'd been beaten a lot when I was a lowly shrimp trying to stick around teenagers, until my mother finally wised up and moved us to a small town south of Boston, away from the gangs. I didn't mind a beating if it came to that, and it probably would have come to that, because I didn't kid myself that I could beat him in a fair fight. He was bigger, stronger, and undoubtedly tougher than a guy who makes a living standing in a classroom and gagging. But it was the look in her eyes when she dared to make me do something about Bobby's insults, the way she let him put his arms around her and stroke her, the way his hands roamed lightly and familiarly over her. I guess I'd always known it, but now I couldn't bring myself to ignore the truth that he was entertaining her. Somewhere, another man was occupying the center of my life, and she was sharing things with him that she would never have shared with me. How can you live when everything is built on lies? Leaning against a tree, I looked up into the overcast night sky and wondered how I could turn a life that had gone off the rails and make it right again. How to forgive a woman who has become everything to you when she gives her body and perhaps her love to another man. I wondered if they laughed at me when they were together. I heard a body stumbling through the weeds and bouncing off the trees as someone staggered toward the lake. Stopping a dozen feet away from me, facing the dark lake, he didn't even look back at me. Even from the rear, I knew who it was. I punched him. I'll be damned, Lyle. I didn't think you were capable of that, you wimp. Sure, you had to sneak up on me, but at least you had the guts to try to hit me. But now I'm gonna hurt you. Really hurt you, boy. And I'll be right, because I'll tell everyone, including Diana, how you hit me. We fought for a long time, but I still prevailed. I grabbed him and said, I'm going to ask you some questions, Bobby, and you're going to tell me the truth. He finally nodded and then said softly, You're on top, Lyle, so I'll tell you anything you want to know. But there will come a day when I'm on top, and when I do, I think you'll just disappear. No one will ever know what happened to you. Maybe, but right now I want to know how long you entertained Diana. He was silent for a moment. This time or before? I already know you've been entertaining her since we met. That is, since we got married. About 4 years. 4 years. Yes. How did it happen? How often? He smiled gloatingly, but immediately disappeared, and I believed his words. I've been stalking her since the day you married her. I tried everything, showing up at her work, just dropping by the house, playing sad, trying to make her laugh. But she would never cheat on you. It was driving me crazy. One day, about 4 to 4.5 years ago, she came up to me as I was leaving a 7-Eleven store. She wasn't smiling or flirty, but she asked if I wanted to go out for coffee. We didn't do anything that day, or for another 6 months, but she looked after me. Then one day we ended up at my house. That's when it all happened. And it's been like that for the last 4 years. Every 3 or 4 months she comes over, we have fun for a day or two, and then she comes back to your place and it's like it never happened. I tried to make sense of what he was telling me. This wasn't just a one-night stand. It had been 4 years. 4 goddamn years she'd been stabbing me in the back. Enjoying life with a guy who didn't have grease under his fingernails and provided her with a good life, and all she had to do was put up with his boring entertainment. So she stayed with me for the money? Is that it? He groaned softly and then surprised me by laughing. You're a goddamn idiot! You don't get it, do you? What don't I understand? She never needed your money, asshole. I drive a backhoe and make almost as much as you do, if you believe what she once told me in bed. And you know Richard and Ricky set it up so they could split all their money before she died. In a few years, she'll be able to buy and sell you, asshole. You're no goddamn prize in terms of money. Then why? She loves you, you goddamn asshole. Why? I'll never know. She loves me. Is that why she's having fun with you? Jesus Christ. You don't understand shit, do you? She's just bored with you. She wants to have some real fun. You can't give her what I can give her. You're the one who ruined everything. She was gonna marry me, you know? She was. Those two boys of yours would have been mine. She loved me, or she would have. We'd been together since junior high. We were the same people. We would have been happy. And then you show up with your smart mouth and your good looks and talk about things she'd never seen or imagined. And you tricked her into thinking you were the right man for her. I looked at him again. You stupid bastard. I'm the best thing that ever happened to her. You just couldn't handle the fact that I took her away from you. Yeah, I guess you're right, smartass. And look how happy it made her, and everyone else too. She tried to love you and live without fun, tried to stay in a marriage that was killing her. I lost the woman I loved and should have had. I should have been sneaking around with her and seeing her go home with you from those parties. And you poor bastard. With those words, I made sure he could never have fun again. I won't go into detail about what exactly I did, but you can believe me that he is forever deprived of having fun with the opposite sex. Next chapter. She just stared at me. He told me everything, Diana, and I believed him. People don't usually lie when you snap their fingers. Oh my God. 4 years. 4 years. Tears rolled down her face. I couldn't believe that part of me hated her, and a bigger part of me still loved her. No, baby. Maybe a little, but that's not the point. It's hard to explain. It's been like this since the very first time we did it. No other man has ever had this effect on me. It's not that, but it's the closest thing I can explain. And I think maybe if I told you that I bored you to tears. So why didn't you leave me if he was so wonderful? He wasn't. This fun with him was wonderful. I love you. I reached out and touched her face, wiping away a tear. I know you're not in love with me, but I believe you love me and our marriage. But I left the rest unspoken, walked around her and began moving my luggage and laptop into our family Saturn. I was keeping the more spacious Ford Escort for her and the kids. It took me 3 trips, but finally I was done and back in the house. She didn't seem to move from her seat. She reached out her hands to grab me, but they stayed hanging in the air. I don't want this, baby. I don't know how, but there has to be some way to make this right. Not really. Our marriage is over. I want to see the boys and be a part of their lives. But us is gone. Because you hate me. I looked into her sparkling eyes. No, I love you, that's why it's so hard. But you can't breathe life into a corpse. We can go to counseling, see a therapist, anything. We won't go because deep down you don't want to be married to me anymore. I don't think you believe anything can work out between us. How can you say that? Remember I said that silence is eloquent. Sometimes silence says more than words. I know you don't really want to save our marriage because ever since I let you know I was leaving, you still haven't said 2 things that would show me that you still need me. Those are the first things I would have told you, but they never came out of your mouth. We looked at each other, and the question was clear in her eyes. You never said, "Don't go, please don't go." When it finally came to her, she fell to her knees and cradled her face in her hands. She was crying as I walked out the door. The end. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.